Today we are going to analyze one of the most disturbing psychological experiments ever conducted. A scientist who used his own son as part of a real-life experiment. This is the Kellogg Experiment. In 1930, psychologist Winthrop Kellogg came across a newspaper article that completely captured his attention. The story described two Indian girls, Amala and Kamala, who had allegedly been discovered living inside a cave surrounded by wolves. According to the reports, the girls behaved more like animals than humans. Kellogg believed the so-called wolf girls had been born with completely normal human intelligence, but because they were raised in an animal environment, they had learned to behave like animals. From this, he developed a disturbing theory. There may be specific stages in childhood that are absolutely essential for integrating into human society and developing normal behavior. This idea pushed Kellogg to investigate a much deeper question: what truly separates humans from animals? He strongly believed that, although genetic differences obviously existed, much of human behavior was shaped by environmental conditioning. In other words, he believed that if an animal were raised in a completely human environment, it could potentially begin behaving almost like a human being. And to test this theory, Kellogg made a shocking decision. They used their own child, their 10-month-old son, Donald, alongside a 7.5-month-old female chimpanzee named Gua. At first, Kellogg wasn't satisfied with the age difference between the two, but there were no better alternatives available. For the next 9 months, Donald and Gua would be raised as equals. Many people criticized Kellogg heavily, arguing that the experiment placed his own son in danger. Today, the experiment is widely considered deeply unethical. The goal was simple and terrifying. Donald and Gua would be treated exactly the same. They would wear the same clothes, eat the same food, play with the same toys, receive the same attention and stimulation. Essentially, they would be raised like brother and sister. Kellogg wanted to observe both of them closely to discover the exact moment where humans and animals begin separating in terms of learning ability, intelligence, and especially language development. For approximately 9 months, teams of scientists, psychologists, and doctors carefully studied both the baby and the chimpanzee. But then something happened that nobody expected. Instead of Gua becoming more human, Donald began behaving more like the chimpanzee. Gua actually developed certain skills faster than Donald. She showed better motor abilities, stronger balance, and even greater comprehension of certain commands and language cues. Donald began copying her behavior. He saw Gua almost like a leader. Soon the child started making the same noises as the chimpanzee. He attempted to imitate her sounds and even began putting objects into his mouth the same way she did. The experiment's results were eventually published in 1941 in a work titled The Ape and the Child. At that point, Kellogg realized the experiment had gone too far. He admitted that if the experiment continued, his son could suffer serious long-term problems involving speech, language, and normal human behavior. In fact, Kellogg later acknowledged that Donald would likely carry psychological consequences from the experiment for the rest of his life. So what happened to Gua? After the experiment ended, she was returned to the Orange Park Primate Facility. Tragically, she died from pneumonia a little over a year after leaving the Kellogg household. Many believe Gua's departure deeply affected Donald emotionally, even though he was still very young. Despite the grim predictions surrounding the experiment, Donald eventually continued developing, but not without complications. At 19 months old, he still struggled to pronounce words properly, build sentences, or communicate like other children his age. Fortunately, as the years passed, Donald managed to recover and later graduated as a medical doctor. After suffering from severe depression, he died in 1972. To this day, many people believe the psychological effects of the experiment may have followed him throughout his life. Without a doubt, the consequences of this experiment were devastating, both for the Kellogg family and for Gua. But the experiment also taught scientists important things about chimpanzee development and how closely primates can adapt to human environments, something that deeply shocked researchers at the time. Kellogg ultimately concluded that young children are extremely vulnerable to environmental influence during early childhood. Still, the experiment quickly became infamous. Many critics labeled it bizarre, irresponsible, and sensationalist, while Kellogg himself became one of the most controversial psychologists of his era. And maybe the most disturbing part of all is this: if a child can begin acting like an animal simply because of its environment, then how much of what we call human behavior is truly natural? Thanks for watching this video. Let me know what you think about the Kellogg experiment in the comments, and subscribe for more disturbing stories and mysteries like this in future videos.